Hey guys, this is Jacko Buddy once again with breakblock.org, coming with you with part 2 of the series that we started, working on a basic tutorial on the game we called Maze Man. So if you haven't seen part 1, make sure you go back and look for part 1 first. You can either find it on our YouTube channel or on breakblock.org under the programming section. You'll see Game Maker listed as one of the softwares there. So where we left off last time, we made some basic sprites right there, and we made these objects, and we went ahead and we made our first room, which we kind of threw together, you know, this little basic maze right here. We gotta stretch that out. And so we have like a basic foundation of a visual thing for a game, but what we haven't done yet is made anything move or anything act in any kind of way. So we're gonna go ahead and look into that. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna close out our room editor, and we're going to go under our objects. And remember, objects are the things in programming that do something. Sprites are just images, rooms are just a layout. In order to program or to have anything do anything, you're going to have to go through objects. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go to our player object. And we already looked at this window a little bit last time, but there are a few parts of this we did not look at. I'll tell you what, let's kind of stretch this out a little bit. There we go. Now, last time we kind of looked along at this left bar a little bit, and then I talked about the show information, how again, it gives you some basic stats on this, but there's not much in here. And so, like I said in part 1, we're going to come back and look at that whenever we add some in here, and you're going to see this object begin to really develop as we go throughout this program. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to make this player move. And now, if you recall, in the concept for this game, we're going to have it to where when you hit an arrow key, the player is going to move in that direction as far as he can, and when he hits a wall, he's going to stop, and only then can you change directions. So that way we can have some nice little puzzles where, you know, you have to go a certain way or maybe move some blocks or things like that so that you can slide into the proper place to get to the end. Instead of just walking there, you're going to have to shoot, you know, the proper directions. You've probably seen some little games like that before. If you're looking at game design, you should be pretty well versed on some game concepts. So what we're going to do is we're going to do an add event. And basically what an event is in this window, you have the add event, and then you have actions. And an action is what occurs whenever a certain event happens. And so we're going to do our add event. And you can see we have create, destroy, alarm, step, etc. Now we have keyboard, but the thing with keyboard is when you're holding down a key, do this, and we don't really want that because this is supposed to be you hit a button and he moves and then he stops when he hits a wall. And so we're actually going to do key press, which means when the key goes down on the keyboard, it's going to trigger an action and run it. And similarly, you have key release as well, which is when you let go of the key, it happens. But in this instance, we're going to use key press, so you're going to click that, and this little context window is going to pop out. And you can see you have like left, right, up, and down as your arrow keys. Control, Alt, Shift, Space, and Enter, and then you have your keypad, which is different than if you use your digits. And that's something to remember. 0 on the keypad is not the same as 0 above your letters on your keyboard. And then, of course, you have all your letters, and you have your function keys. You have other, those are a few special keys that you're not going to use much. And then you can even program if no key is pressed or if any key is pressed. So those are a few things that you can do with that. We're going to go ahead and we're going to use our right arrow key. So we're going to hit right. And you can see over on the event tab now, it has added the press right event. And you can see when you mouse over it right there, key press event for right key. And so we're going to go ahead and make actions now. So when this is pressed, what do we want to do? Well, what I'm thinking we're going to do here, the way I like to handle this, because in programming there's a few different ways you can do things, but what we're ultimately going to be doing here is we're going to use this button right here. And you see these are all programming representations that you can use. And this right here is your speed horizontal. So we're going to either you can drag it over like that, and you can see it's going to pop up with this box so we can set things. But I'm going to go ahead and delete that, and you can just use your delete key to get rid of it. Or you can also just right click, so this, boom, and it puts it, and so that's a little bit of a quicker way than dragging everything around. It just right click, and it drops it to the bottom of the code. So you only drag if you need to change the order or things like that, otherwise I recommend just right clicking. Now horizontal speed, for right it's easy. We're going to go ahead and do a speed of 16, which means per step in our program, which by default there's 30 steps to a second. You can adjust that, but that's for a later day. It's going to move 16 pixels across the screen, which if you recall, our image is 32 by 32. So really, every 1/15th of a second, it's going to move the full size of this image, which seems really fast until you get into the program and you realize the size of our maze, and you're going to appreciate it being fast, because if you do it slow, then you have to sit there and watch your guy move. People want their games to move fast. So we're going to do horizontal speed of 16. Now, that's all fine and dandy, but once we start doing up and down, we want to make sure he's not moving up or down at the same time. So just for the sake of checking our code, we're going to go ahead and use this down arrow right here, and that is going to be your set vertical speed, and we're just going to put it on 0, which is your default value. And something I didn't point out before, you can see at the top you have self, other, and object. And all of this code you're going to leave it on self, which means it applies to the object it's inside of. Other is only for collisions, really. And other is basically when you collide, you do something to whatever you collided with. And an object, if you click that, we can actually specify an object for it to do this on. But we're going to leave everything on self. Relative is something for another day as well. It basically would add or subtract the value in this box rather than change it. So, but we're going to go ahead and just leave it 0. That's not going to be checked, and that's going to be self, and we're going to hit our OK. And so you can see, if you mouse over, you can see the code a little quicker, 16 and 0. And then if we do our show information now, you can see right there, we have key press event for key, set the horizontal speed to 16, and set the vertical speed to 0. And so what's kind of cool about this little document is you can save right there, and you can even print this out. And so if you really have this complex object in your game someday, like some big RPG player with all his stats and he's moving around and fighting and doing different things like that, and you're sitting there ripping your hair out trying to figure out why one particular thing that isn't working, you can pull up that screen, you can even print out a copy, bust out a highlighter, and just go to the code, flip through pages, digging through it. This makes everything a little easier because it kind of shows it to you in one big piece instead of having to scan through every event and every action looking for the problem. So it's a good little tool to remember. Now we're going to go ahead and hit OK on this box. That always saves our changes. And you're going to want to hit save at the top. And then we're going to go ahead and run our program. And in just a second, you're going to see an issue that we're going to have to resolve. But I'm going to go ahead and not spoil everything. And so we got our game, and I'm going to hit the right arrow key. He's going to go, and he goes right off the screen. And the reason that is because, remember, our player isn't solid, but our walls are. And for the sake of good programming, we don't really want to make our character solid because it can mess with some of the more advanced stuff that we might do with this game later. So what we're going to do is we're going to make a collision. And this is very simple. Basically, you're going to go to the object player again. So we're going to open this back up. And you're going to do add event. Now in add event, you actually have one type of event right there, collision. Click it, and it gives you object choices. We want to collide with the wall. So you can see now we have a second event, collision with object wall. What do we want it to do? The best way to just do this, if you want to just stop all movement, instead of doing horizontal speed to 0, vertical speed to 0, you could do it that way. But we're going to take this first feature right here, move fixed, right click it, and just click this center stop box right there. And you see it turns orange, speed's at 0, hit OK, and that's a stopper. And so you don't necessarily have to hit OK on that object box. I'm going to go and just save it. I'm going to leave it open just to keep our workstation like I want it. Going to hit run on the game, and now we're going to hit a right key, and we stop. So you see now our player is bound by our walls, and that's a very simple, easy way to just do a collision with, when I hit this I want to stop. There's certain things that you may encounter later in programming where you don't want it to be that simple of a collision, but for the sake of this program where everything is moving either 32 by 32 or 16 by 16 or some easy increment like that, that should be all it takes, because mathematically that character is going to line up perfectly with all your walls. When you start messing with oddly shaped walls or diagonal slopes or things like that, then you're going to have to do some more coding. But for the sake of this project, that's going to work. Now, we can go right. So why don't we go left now? So we're going to come to our press right, and for the sake of saving time, we're going to right click on it. And this is a good trick to remember for later. You have duplicate event. So we're going to hit that, and it's going to bring up our choose event to add. And so we're going to do key press, and we're going to hit left. Alright, you can see it took the code from our right and just literally copied it, except that our code is not right because we want to go left. Little pun for you there. So we're going to go to our first event, our set horizontal speed. And something to know in programming, including GameMaker, is when you do negative speed, it's really almost more like a velocity than a speed because it's a directional. When you move negative, you're moving the opposite way down your axis. Just like in mathematics, you have your x and your y axis. Your horizontal is your x axis. When you move negative 16, you're moving to your left. So we're going to do a speed of negative 16 right there. And this should be set to 0, and it is. So we're going to leave that alone. And so we're going to hit save, and we're going to hit run one more time just to make sure everything's working. So I'm going to hit left. I hit that wall. I'm going to go right. We're going to go left. And boy, isn't that just an exciting game right there. All right. So we got left and right, and that's our x-axis. So we can now move freely across our x-axis. Now it's time to move along our y-axis. So again, for the sake of saving time, we're going to duplicate either one of these events. It really doesn't matter. And you're going to do key press, and you're going to do up. And then now that we're going up, you're going to want your horizontal speed at 0. Definitely at 0. And then for our vertical speed, up is probably the most confusing thing in GameMaker, because if you know your mathematics well, we are working in quadrant 4 of the grid, which means that negative is actually going to be going up in this case. It's backwards. Your axes are to the upper left. And so your x-axis is running across the top of your monitor, and your y-axis is running across the left side of your monitor, and that's because of the way that monitors draw on the screen. Your monitor, right now as you're watching this video, is drawing from the top left to the bottom right of your screen, which is why sometimes in video games when you get some graphics tearing, you notice that the top half of your screen is updating before the bottom half. And that's because it updates in horizontal rows going down your screen. And so in order to go up, we're going to have to do negative 16. And be careful not to mix that up, because what's going to start happening is your up keys are going to be going down and your down keys are going to be going up, or things like that. So you just have to kind of drill that into your brain that up is negative and down is positive on your y-axis. So we're going to go and duplicate this event, and we're going to hit down. And horizontal speed is going to be set to 0 still. Sounds good. And now that we're going down, that's going to be positive 16. So we're going to hit OK. Now, theoretically, our little maze should be completely navigable. So we're going to let it compile. We're going to go left, and we're going to go down, and we're going to go left, and we're going to go up. And there you go. We can now navigate this maze. But there's a major problem. Look at this. I'm not supposed to be able to do that. If you recall, we are supposed to be locked onto our grid. And so we need to find a way to tell the game, hey, don't let the player do that. The player needs to be locked down when I'm moving up. I can't move in your direction until I hit this wall. I can't move. Now I can move. I can move again. I'm not allowed to move right now. Now I can move again. So how are we going to do that? Well, a little algebra lesson for those of you who don't know. We're going to use a variable. And a variable is just a representation of a value. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go and create an event. And we're going to do create. And how the create event works, this is a very, very powerful and commonly used event, because when the object is first made at the very beginning of the game, when the room first opens, it runs whatever's in create. Now you have to be careful, because remember that depth value that I taught you about in part 1? Just like it draws in the order of that depth, so something deeper on the screen, like 99 depth, would be a lot deeper in the screen. That's going to be created before something at 0 depth, or even like you can do negative 99 depth, so it's like coming out of your screen almost. That's going to be the last thing made. And so if I, in my create event, try and call an object or a variable that has not been drawn yet because it hadn't been created in the order, I'm going to get an error out of GameMaker. So sometimes you don't want to use create event to do your first stuff, but normally you try and design your game in such a way that you're able to, because create only runs one time when that room first opens. Which, by the way, the persistent whenever you run persistent and have that object moving persistently through rooms, it will not run create in the next room because it's a persistent object. It just copies and pastes it over. It's already created. And so that's basically what this box is really for. And so that'll just ignore everything inside of this action. Now, in order to create a variable, there's two ways we can do that. You go to the control tab, and you can see right there, look, variables. That's a nice, pretty easy way to do it. So you can do this, and you're going to get your variable creation, and it's going to say set variable. So we got to give it a variable name, and we want to give it a meaningful name. Like, don't call it X, okay? First of all, in GameMaker, you can't even call it X because X is a reserved term for the X position on your axis. But in this sense, we want to give it a valuable name that we know what it's doing. So we're going to call it can move. And in variable names, you can have spaces. We could put an underscore, but I'm going to go ahead and follow kind of a common programming convention with lowercase on the first word and a capital afterward. And so we're going to do can move, and then for those of you that are fluent in programming, you understand what a Boolean is. Basically, we're going to use this variable like it's a Boolean, though there aren't really data types on this variable. If you're new to programming, that doesn't mean a lot to you. Don't really worry about it at this point. Just know we're going to set can move to 1, and 1 is a normal programming representation of true. So we're basically telling ourselves that the player is allowed to move right now. So we can move. Alternatively, if you wanted, you could say like open quotes yes, like that, but it's not a good programming convention just because it's a little harder to process. So we're just gonna do 1, nice and easy. And so now this object, when it's first made, is gonna have a variable called can move, and it's equal to 1. And so that's gonna always be there. If you do your show information, you can see creates at the very top because it's the first thing to happen. And you can see you have set variable can move to 1, and then that's like our stop right there. And then these are all the events that we've been putting together. And so it's pretty simple because it's all kind of copied and pasted from those other events. But as you get more complex in programming, this document's going to get really long and really thorough and in-depth, and that's going to be a nice little guide for you. And so we have our can move is equal to 1, and it should be the only variable that we need. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go to our, let's do press right. Since that was the first one we made, it's going to be the first one we modify. Now, right next to where you did your create variable or set variable, right there, you're going to move 1 over to the right, and you have this kind of oddly shaped test variable. It's like a, I guess it'd be an octagon. So you're going to right click that. You can see it's called test variable. And so test variable, we're going to do the same name. It is very critical that your name is the exact same as you entered it in part 1. Capital letters matter, numbers, spaces, everything. It has to be letter for letter, word for word, capital for lowercase, the same, or you're going to have an error because you're going to be telling it to check a variable that doesn't exist, and GameMaker is going to get real mad at you and throw you a nasty looking error box, and you're just going to have a problem. In fact, I'm going to show you that. So we're going to do can move 1, which by the way doesn't exist. We're going to do value equal to 1. Operation is going to be equal to. You can see you can also check if it's less than, greater than, things like that. Equal to. We're going to hit OK. We're going to move that in a second, but let me just show you like the error we're going to get. It's going to fail in just a second. I'm going to hit right. Oh, fatal error in action number 3 of the key press event for right key. So the third action and right key failed in object player. So that's the best thing about that, is it tells me where. So see action number 3 and the right of player. And so it just told me, hey, this doesn't exist. But if I do that, remove that 1, we're going to save, we're going to run it. And I'm going to hit my right key and see there's no error anymore. And right now that variable is doing nothing. We're about to make it do some magic. So remember how I talked about how you can drag stuff in obviously the drag and drop functions of GameMaker. You're going to grab your test or your check, and you're going to move it up. Well, why is it not letting me move it up? Let's see. All right. Oh, there it goes. I don't know why it wasn't letting me grab that a second ago. It is now. So, okay. That was one thing just to kind of note on GameMaker Studio. I don't know why, but it's got a few little interesting bugs. But okay, now we have that at number 1. So your can move is equal to 1, should be action number 1, and then your movement ones, your speed should be 2 and 3. Now what we need to do is we need to create what's called a block, which, little fun fact for you, we're called break block for a reason, is because when you make a block in a code, you can use a break command to get out of it. Thus the exploding code image that you can see in the bottom right of your screen. It's a little programming joke on our name. But basically we're going to make a block, and so you have these green arrows right here under the other section. You're going to go ahead and grab one of those, and you're going to carry it like that, and see it pops it up like that. It's making a block, and then we're going to go ahead and close it. And so what that does is this, the object right before that block begins affects both of these inside the object right there. And so that's all that is it tells it, hey, you are going to affect everything in that. And because otherwise, if you don't do that, it'll only work for the one piece of code that follows it. So you want to, usually even when you only have one piece of code, it's just a good thing to go ahead and put it in a block and organize your code, make your code look real clean and solid, and it pops it out and indents it. And by the way, this little tip for you, you can actually put blocks inside of blocks, and you can see it starts popping out. And you're going to eventually have these real complex structures, and if you don't organize that well, then you're going to regret that later, because it's going to get really confusing. And so can move is equal to 1. We're going to make it move to the right. It's going to not do vertical, and then what we're going to do is we're going to do another set variable. Okay, and we're going to put it inside of our block as the last action. We're going to do the can move variable just like before, the normal spelling, and we're going to set it equal to 0, which in programming, when you're doing kind of a true false style thing, 0 means false. Now notice this. We tell it that when you press right, if that's equal to 1, then do these things. However, we set it to 0 right here, so the next time I hit the right arrow key, this isn't going to work because it's going to be equal to 0. And I'm going to show you that real quick. It's going to be kind of hard to really show it, just because I'm going to be stuck on this right wall. But basically, if I were to keep hitting right here, it's not working because that variable is equal to 0. And so it's skipping this block, because if this is wrong, everything inside the block gets skipped. And that's called a condition, or a condition statement inside of programming. So that's a nice piece of information to understand in programming. Conditions are very popular. And so now what we're going to do, we're going to go ahead and for the sake of time, we're going to do this, right click, copy. And we're going to go to left, and we're going to paste, and we're going to do our set variable at the end. Can move will be equal to 0. Close it up. And then we're going to go to our up, and we're going to do the same thing. And we're going to do this for all of the events, the same thing. We're setting can move to 0 whenever it moves, and we're making sure it's testing for 1. So basically, once one of them moves, it's going to just stop, and it's not going to be able to move anymore. I'll show you that that's working in a minute, and then we're going to make it where we'll be able to move again. But so I did that on all 4 of them, and if you look in here now, kind of cool, you can see if can move is equal to 1, then do these things, and see how they're all nice and indented for you to show it off. And that's what this document is good for, is it kind of organizes it more like linear written programming if you like that. So we're going to do run, and it's going to come up, and we're going to hit right, and so we're moving, and then I'm going to do down. Oh, I can't move in any direction now, you see, because can move is equal to 0 and it has to be 1. So right now I can't move. So how do we fix it? Well, what happens every single time we move? We hit the wall. And remember how we made our collision right here instead of using solid? This is why. If I just use solid, then I would not have put this collision event, and I wouldn't have anything to play with for that collision, and so I'd have to go make this later. But now it's already here ready for me. We got a collision. So what we're going to do is when we collide with our wall, we're going to set a variable, can move is equal to 1. Okay? And so we're going to hit OK, and we're going to do save, and we're going to do run. And now watch the magic happen. We're moving. Oh, I can't use any arrow keys. I hit a wall. Now I can move again. And you see how that's working? I can't move until I've hit the next wall. I'm actually like, I can't move. I'm stuck in space. But then once I move, I can move again. And so now our character is locked to this little maze. And so you see, like, I can't get back up to that ramp unless I go all the way around the room. And so that's kind of the strategy of this gameplay that we're doing, is trying to figure out the best way to navigate this room. And so that's what we got right now. We've been running about 25 minutes, just like part 1, so I'm going to go ahead and stop it there. There are going to be other parts to this series. We're going to develop out this game a little bit more. Now that we got some of the basics done, we're going to do a little more complex coding, trying to maybe do some cool stuff to make the game a little more interesting. Maybe some pickups at some point, like I said, some little traps. Just some different things to really make this a solid looking little mini game and try and convey a few more programming ideas. But you should understand, you know, objects and sprites and rooms, and you should now, you know, variables and conditions. So what I encourage you to do before we even progress on to part 3, before you progress to part 3, go ahead and play with what you learned a little bit. Make some variables, try and do some stuff. You know, see what you can do with it. Play with it. Mess with the numbers. Go break it. Get some error messages. Get mad and slam your desk and go, why ain't it working? Why is GameMaker throwing me errors? Because that's how you learn programming. But I hope to see you in part 3. And remember, for this video and for other videos, you can check out breakblock.org, our website, or you can check out our channel on YouTube. All right. Thank you and happy programming.